I see you there, sitting alone with the weight of absence pressing against your chest. The empty chair, the unanswered message, the silence where a voice once lived. Your tears have become companions more faithful than those who promised to stay. You search your phone for comfort but find only shallow distractions. At night, your thoughts circle like birds with nowhere to land. I know this desert you walk through. I have felt its heat burn away my certainties, leaving only the bones of faith. But listen closely now, for within this very wound lies a doorway that few discover, a sacred passage where God waits, not with judgment, but with the water your soul has been thirsting for. I remember the day my own world collapsed around me. The marketplace in Kenya bustled with life, merchants calling out prices, children weaving between stalls with laughter trailing behind them like ribbons. But I moved through it all like a ghost, unable to feel the fabric between my fingers or taste the sweet dates offered to me. My teacher Shams had vanished, and with him, all the light that had illuminated my path. Friends spoke words that fell like pebbles at my feet, well-intended but useless against the mountain of my grief. I returned to my chamber, closed the door, and sat with emptiness as my only guest. What no one tells you about profound loss is how it strips away pretense. In those raw hours when sleep would not come, I discovered something that the comfortable never learn. Pain is not an obstacle on the spiritual path, it is the path itself. The wound becomes a doorway when we stop trying to escape it. Your broken heart is not a punishment. It is an invitation to a depth of knowing that contentment could never teach you. In the silence of that chamber, I began to notice how my breath continued without my permission, how my blood still coursed through my veins without consulting my despair. Something was sustaining me that did not require my belief or enthusiasm. God was present not as a rescue from my suffering, but as the very ground beneath it. I had been looking for God in the light, but he was holding me in the darkness. This may contradict everything you have been taught, that tears are not to be rushed away but witnessed, that the ache in your chest deserves respect, not correction. The world tells you to move on quickly, to replace loss with activity, to fill silence with noise. But I tell you that wisdom lives in the willingness to remain when every instinct says, flee. The mystics know what the merchants of quick comfort cannot fathom. God is never closer than when your world has shattered. I learned to sit with my pain like a host with an unexpected guest, not welcoming it exactly, but acknowledging its presence without resentment. I would light a candle in the evening and watch how its flame both consumed and illuminated. So too with grief. It burns, yes, but also brings light if we have the courage to look directly at it. I began to speak to God not with the polished prayers of the mosque, but with the raw honesty of the wounded. I am here, broken. I do not understand. I hurt. Help me to bear what I cannot change. And slowly, like water seeping into parched earth, a different quality of presence emerged. Not healing as I had imagined it, not the absence of pain, but a spaciousness around it. The wound remained, but it no longer defined the boundaries of my world. I began to notice moments when beauty would ambush me. The call of the muezzin at dawn, the face of a child looking up at clouds, the taste of bread shared with a stranger. These were not distractions from suffering, but visitations in its midst. What I wish to impress upon you is this paradox. The very thing you are trying to escape contains the seed of your liberation. Your loneliness, that aching void where connection should be, can become the womb of a deeper communion. Your financial struggle, that constant pressure on your thoughts, can become the birthplace of a providence beyond calculation. Your addiction, that cycle of relief and shame, can transform into a path of moment-by-moment surrender that the merely comfortable never discover. God does not wait for you beyond your wounds. God meets you precisely in them. The divine is not repelled by your broken places, but drawn to them. When you pray from that place of authentic need, heaven bends closer to earth than at any other time. I do not offer you escape but companionship, not solutions, but presence. The mystic's path is not around suffering, but through it. Try this simple practice. For 3 minutes each morning, place your hand over your heart. Feel its steady rhythm beneath your palm. Breathe slowly into that space where your wound lives. Do not try to heal anything or change anything. Simply be present with what is, exactly as it is. Say to yourself, "This too is part of my journey. This too is held in divine hands." When thoughts arise to judge your pain or rush you toward false comfort, let them pass like clouds in the sky of your awareness. Return to the sensation beneath your palm. Return to the breath. Return to the moment just as it is. Remember this truth that contradicts the wisdom of the marketplace. Your wound is not a mistake to be corrected, but a doorway to be entered. What appears as emptiness is often fullness misunderstood. The cup must be empty before it can be filled with something new. Trust the emptying. Trust the hollowing out. The divine craftsman is creating space for light you cannot yet imagine. When the desert of loss stretches before you without end, remember that even in the most barren landscape, life persists unseen. Deep roots wait for rain. Seeds sleep until their season. Your faith is not measured by how you feel, but by your willingness to remain open in the face of not knowing. Order will come again, not as you once knew it, but in a pattern you could not have designed from your limited perspective. I promise you not that the pain will disappear, but that it will become fertile ground for a harvest beyond your imagining. I walked for days after Shams disappeared, searching the streets and alleys of Damascus, calling his name until my voice grew hoarse. Each morning I rose with desperate hope. Each night I collapsed with emptiness heavier than stone. My body weakened, my mind splintered. People spoke to me, but their words seemed to come from a great distance. I was a man drowning in the open air. I prayed for strength, but strength did not arrive as I expected. No sudden power filled my limbs. No clarity washed away confusion. Instead, I found myself kneeling by a small stream outside the city, watching how water flowed around obstacles it could not move. The water did not fight the stones in its path. It did not rage against them or try to shatter them with force. It simply found another way, curving and adapting, continuing its journey without resistance. I dipped my hand into the cool current and felt how it passed through my fingers without struggle, maintaining its essential nature regardless of the barrier I created. And I heard within my heart, "This is the strength you seek, not to overpower your circumstances, but to flow within them without losing yourself." This runs counter to what the world teaches about strength. The world says you must conquer, control, master your destiny. The world measures strength by what you can dominate or possess, but true inner strength is revealed not in how much you can control, but in how much you can surrender while maintaining your course. The stream does not fight the mountain. It honors it and finds its path. So too with the soul that seeks to thrive amid life's hardships. I know the morning struggle you face. You open your eyes to a day that demands more than you believe you can give. Bills accumulate on the table. The phone brings news of another setback. The mirror shows a face etched with worry. Your children need what you are not sure you can provide. You wonder if you have what it takes to rise once more and face the world that seems arranged against you. I understand this doubt that visits before dawn. I've entertained it many times at my own table. I want to ask you something, and I ask that you be honest with yourself. Have you been measuring your strength by how well you control outcomes, rather than by how faithfully you respond to what life brings? Do you believe that strength means never breaking, never failing, never showing vulnerability? If this question touches something real inside you, write in the comments, "I am learning a new kind of strength." When you share this, you are not only naming your own journey, but lighting a path for others walking through similar valleys. Your honesty becomes a lantern in the darkness where so many travel alone. The strength I discovered beside that stream was not the absence of weakness, but the presence of something deeper that weakness could not touch. It was not built through force of will alone, though discipline played its part. It emerged through small acts of faithfulness when larger hopes seemed foolish. Let me share what I learned about cultivating this inner strength that flows rather than forces. First, I learned to greet each day with a single commitment, to remain true to my essence regardless of circumstances. Like water that is always water, whether frozen in ice, flowing in a river, or rising as vapor, I would be myself in all conditions. This did not mean I felt no fear or doubt. It meant I acknowledged these as guests in my house without allowing them to dictate my actions. When I could not control my thoughts, I still governed my hands. When I could not quiet my emotions, I still watched over my words. Second, I discovered the power of returning to center. In the midst of chaos, I developed the habit of touching my heart and recalling my name, not as identity, but as reminder of divine origin. This simple gesture became an anchor in storms of confusion. It did not always calm the waters, but it reminded me that I was more than the turbulence I experienced. You possess this same capacity to return to center. When pressures mount and resources seem scarce, place your hand upon your chest. Feel the rhythm beneath your palm. Remember who you were before the world told you who to be. This is not escape. It is reclamation. Third, I embraced the discipline of small consistencies. On days when grand spiritual practices felt beyond reach, I would simply wash my hands mindfully, or arrange my writing materials with care, or prepare a simple meal with full attention. The soul is strengthened not primarily through heroic efforts, but through humble faithfulness in moments no one else will notice or applaud. Begin where you are. If prayer feels distant, simply bow your head for 30 seconds each morning. If meditation seems impossible, just observe 3 conscious breaths whenever you think of it. If study overwhelms, read a single line of sacred text and carry it through your day. The oak appears mighty because it stands firm against the wind, but its true strength lies hidden in 1,000 tiny roots that anchor it to earth. So too with the human spirit. Your capacity to endure is not built through dramatic declarations, but through modest daily choices that few will ever see. The breath you take before speaking harshly. The moment you pause before reacting in anger. The small kindness you offer when no reward is possible. These are the invisible roots of resilience. God places strength not in the absence of weakness, but in its very midst. Like gold that must pass through fire to be purified, the human heart develops its greatest power in the furnace of adversity. This is not to glorify suffering, but to recognize its transformative potential when met with openness rather than resistance. The wound that does not destroy you becomes a well from which others may drink. Your struggle, honored rather than denied, becomes a bridge for those who follow. When I finally accepted that I might never see my beloved teacher again in this life, something shifted within me. Not healing exactly, but a different relationship with the pain. I began to understand that my longing for shams was itself a form of communion with the divine. The very intensity of my missing became a thread connecting me to something beyond physical presence. What appeared as absence revealed itself as a different quality of presence. The cup was empty, yes, but the emptiness itself became sacred. Try this practice for 7 days. Each morning, choose one small action that you will perform with complete attention, regardless of how you feel or what challenges arise. It might be making your bed with care, preparing coffee mindfully, or spending 5 minutes in silence before engaging with the world. The action matters less than the quality of presence you bring to it. This consistent return to presence, this gentle insistence on showing up fully for one small corner of your life, cultivates a strength that circumstances cannot diminish. Remember this truth when doubts assail you. The strength you seek does not depend on conditions being favorable. It flourishes precisely when conditions are not. The flower that grows through concrete does not bloom despite the hardship, but because of the particular quality of resilience the hardship has cultivated within it. You are developing this same resilience through every challenge you face with dignity and presence. The path is not always visible, but it is always beneath your feet. After months of wandering through the emptiness left by Shams, I found myself alone in prayer one night. The lamps had burned low, casting long shadows across the floor of my chamber. Outside, the streets of Konya had grown quiet, only the occasional footstep of a night watchman breaking the silence. I had been reciting prayers mechanically, words that felt hollow in my mouth, when suddenly I stopped. I set aside the formal invocations and spoke directly from the wound in my heart. I cannot find you in these words anymore. I cannot find you in the places I once did. Where are you now when I need you most? No voice answered. No vision appeared. But in the quiet that followed my question, I began to notice something subtle yet profound, the quality of the silence itself. It was not empty as I had assumed. It was not the absence of response, but a different form of presence altogether. Like the space between musical notes that gives meaning to the melody, this silence held a fullness I had overlooked in my desperate search for signs and wonders. I placed my palm against my chest and felt the steady rhythm there. Who maintained that pulse when I slept? Who orchestrated the intricate dance of breath filling and emptying my lungs? Who kept the countless processes of life flowing when my attention was elsewhere? I had been looking. For God is something separate from the very fabric of my existence, as a presence that would arrive from elsewhere to rescue me from my condition. But what if the divine companionship I sought was already woven into the very fact of my being? This insight contradicts our habitual understanding of relationship. We think of companionship as two separate entities coming together, myself here, the other there. But what if the deepest companionship is not between two, but within one? What if the divine is not primarily a visitor to your life, but the very ground of your being, closer to you than your own breath, more intimate than your own thoughts? You have never been alone in the way you feared, because the possibility of absolute isolation is an illusion born of misunderstanding who you truly are. I began to recognize divine presence in the most ordinary moments, in the taste of bread, in the coolness of water on my skin, in the face of a stranger in the marketplace. Not as dramatic visitations from beyond, but as the sacred revealing itself through the material world, moment by moment. The boundary between ordinary and extraordinary dissolved. Every breath became a prayer, every heartbeat a remembrance, every sensation a communion with the source of all being. This does not mean that human loneliness disappeared. I still felt the absence of physical companionship, the lack of a hand to hold, a voice to answer mine. But beneath that surface loneliness, I discovered a deeper belonging that nothing external could provide or remove. Like the ocean beneath waves, this belonging remained constant regardless of the temporary conditions on the surface of my life. If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here, I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you. This is not merely about gathering followers, but about creating a community of seekers who support each other on the path of awakening, souls recognizing each other across time and space. The greatest barrier to experiencing divine companionship is not God's absence, but our own divided attention. The modern world pulls your awareness in countless directions, the endless scroll of images and opinions, the perpetual noise of notifications, the relentless parade of crises demanding your emotional energy. In this fragmentation, the subtle presence that never leaves you goes unnoticed, like stars obscured by city lights. Try this practice for 7 days. Create a daily appointment with silence. Find a corner in your home where you can sit undisturbed. It need not be elaborate. A simple chair, a cushion on the floor, a quiet spot in your garden. Come to this place at the same time each day, even if only for 5 minutes. Sit with no agenda except to be fully present. No special posture is required. No particular thoughts need to be generated or avoided. Simply show up with your whole being and notice what is already here. At first, your mind will rebel. It will generate urgent tasks that suddenly cannot wait. It will produce compelling dramas about past injuries or future concerns. It will remind you of obligations or tempt you with distractions. This is natural. Do not fight against these thoughts. Instead, notice them arising and returning to the silence that holds them all. Like clouds passing through the sky, let them come and go while you remain seated in awareness. Gradually, you may begin to sense what I discovered in my chamber that night, that the silence is not empty but full, that between and beneath your thoughts flows a current of being that has supported you all along. This is not something you create through effort, but something you recognize through receptivity. The divine companion has never left the room of your heart. You have simply been too occupied with visitors to notice the host. One evening, as I sat watching the sunset paint the western sky with colors no artist could capture, I felt a presence beside me that was not physical, yet more real than anything my eyes could see. It was not Shams returned in form, but the essence of what Shams had always pointed toward, the beloved who is never absent though often unrecognized. Tears filled my eyes, not from sorrow but from recognition. I had been looking for love as something to acquire, when all along it was the very substance from which I was made. This truth flies in the face of your conditioning. You are not alone in the universe, cast adrift in empty space. You are not separate from the source of all being. The very fact of your existence is already a relationship, already a communion. Your breath, your heartbeat, your awareness, these are not possessions you own, but gifts continuously received from the treasury of being. The divine is not waiting for you to be worthy of companionship. It is the very medium in which you live and move, like a fish surrounded by water. I know the particular flavor of your loneliness, the empty chair across the table, the cold side of the bed, the celebrations that highlight absence, the achievements with no one to share them, the questions with no one to answer, the thoughts that circle endlessly with no witness. I do not dismiss these pains or suggest they are imaginary. The human heart was designed for connection, and when those connections are severed by death, distance, or discord, the resulting wound is real. But I invite you to consider that beneath this human loneliness lies a deeper current of communion that cannot be broken, because it was never established in time and therefore cannot end in time. It is not a relationship you maintain through effort, but the fundamental nature of existence itself. You do not need to create it or earn it. You need only remove the obstacles to recognizing what has been true all along. The 80-day obstacles are primarily habits of attention, where and how you place your awareness. Most people live predominantly on the surface of life, reacting to appearances, chasing pleasures, avoiding discomforts. They look for God in special buildings or dramatic experiences, missing the continuous miracle of existence itself. The divine companionship is overlooked not because it is hidden, but because it is so pervasive, like fish searching everywhere for water. Begin with this simple acknowledgement each morning. I do not walk alone today. The same presence that holds the stars in their courses holds me. The same intelligence that orchestrates the seasons flows through my veins. The same love that gives birth to worlds beats in my heart. This is not positive thinking or self-deception. It is the recognition of a truth more fundamental than any temporary condition of your life. Remember this paradox: when loneliness descends, the very awareness with which you notice your aloneness is itself evidence that you are not ultimately alone. Something in you witnesses the experience. Something in you remains untouched by it. This witnessing presence is not separate from the divine ground of all being. It is where your individual consciousness meets the universal. In that meeting place, no true isolation is possible. The wave may feel separate, but it has never left the ocean. There was a time after my great loss when I could find no pattern to my days. I would sleep when exhaustion finally claimed me, eat when hunger could no longer be ignored, pray when desperation drove me to my knees. My students watched with concern as I moved through the madrasa like a ghost, present in body but absent in spirit. One morning, an elder scholar approached me. He did not offer sympathy or advice. Instead, he asked me to help him arrange his books, a simple task that would occupy an hour, no more. I agreed, if only to escape the weight of his gaze. As we worked together in silence, placing volumes in their proper order, something unexpected happened. The simple rhythm of the task, taking each book, examining its title, finding its place on the shelf, began to quiet the storm in my mind. For that brief hour, I was anchored to the present moment through the discipline of ordinary work. When we finished, the elder nodded once and said, "Tomorrow, the same time." It was not a question, but a gentle command. And so began my return to order, not through grand spiritual revelations, but through the humble gateway of daily discipline. This may surprise you, but the path to spiritual liberation is not paved with spectacular experiences or dramatic transformations. The true path is found in the faithful tending of small disciplines that, over time, reshape the landscape of your soul. The world tells you to seek peak experiences, to chase emotional highs, to measure your spiritual progress by the intensity of your feelings. I tell you instead to establish a rhythm to your days that honors the sacred in the ordinary. It is not the depth of your ecstasy, but the consistency of your practice that transforms. Think of the desert traveler who must cross vast distances with limited water. Such a traveler does not run or leap across the sands, spending energy in dramatic bursts. Instead, they adopt a measured pace, a rhythm of movement that can be sustained from sunrise to sunset. They recognize that it is not speed but consistency that will carry them to their destination. Your spiritual journey requires this same wisdom. The consistent practice of small disciplines will carry you further than occasional moments of intense devotion. I learned to structure my days around simple anchors of practice. Before dawn, I would rise for prayer, washing my hands and face with mindfulness, feeling the cool water as a blessing on my skin. After morning teaching, I would take a moment to stand in the courtyard, observing the play of light on stone, the movement of birds across the sky, the breath entering and leaving my body. Before each meal, I would pause to remember the source of all nourishment. Before sleep, I would review the day, acknowledging where I had been present and where I had been lost in distraction or reactivity. These were not elaborate rituals requiring special conditions. They were small moments of return, doorways to presence that could be entered regardless of external circumstances. Through their consistent practice, I discovered that spirituality is not a separate domain of life reserved for special occasions, but a quality of attention that can infuse every aspect of ordinary existence. The division between sacred and mundane dissolved. Every act became an opportunity for communion with the divine reality that sustains all things. Let me offer you a practical discipline that seems simple but contains profound power. Each morning, before your day begins in earnest, take one small area of your living space, perhaps a table, a shelf, or even just the space around your bed, and bring it to complete order. Remove what does not belong. Clean what needs cleaning. Arrange what remains with care and attention. Do this same practice each day, perhaps choosing a different area as needed, but always with the same quality of presence and care. This practice may seem trivial compared to your larger concerns, the financial pressures, the relationship struggles, the existential questions that keep you awake at night. But within this humble discipline lies a powerful truth. Outer order creates the conditions for inner clarity. As you bring attention and care to your physical environment, you are simultaneously cultivating these same qualities in your consciousness. The space around you becomes a mirror and a support for the space within you. The wisdom that contradicts common understanding is this: discipline is not the opposite of freedom, but its necessary foundation. Just as the banks of a river do not restrict water, but enable it to flow with power and purpose, so too the structures you establish in your life do not limit your spirit, but give it direction and force. Without these banks, your spiritual energy dissipates like water on flat sand, never gathering the momentum needed for transformation. One evening, as I was arranging my writing materials before beginning work on a poem, I noticed how differently I felt when my external space was in order. My mind settled more easily, my breath deepened naturally, my attention became more focused and clear. It was as if the outer arrangement created a template that my inner state naturally followed. I realized that by consistently attending to the order of my environment, I was creating conditions conducive to spiritual clarity, much as a gardener prepares soil for seeds. God is present not only in moments of transcendent awareness, but in the patient tending of daily life. When you wash a dish with full attention, feeling the warmth of the water, the texture of the cloth, the transformation from soiled to clean, you are participating in divine activity as surely as when you pray or meditate. The sacred does not need to announce itself with trumpets and wonders. It is woven into the very fabric of ordinary existence, waiting to be recognized through the lens of attentive presence. Try this practice for 10 days. Choose one small action that you perform daily, perhaps making your bed, preparing breakfast, or walking to your place of work. Commit to performing this action each day with complete attention, as if it were a sacred ritual. Notice the sensations in your body as you move. Observe the thoughts that arise and gently return to the physical experience of the task. Recognize that this ordinary moment contains the extraordinary gift of existence itself. This is not a practice of achieving, but of recognizing what is already present. When life seems chaotic and beyond your control, remember this truth. There is always something within your sphere of influence that can be brought to order. You may not be able to resolve all the complexities of your financial situation in a day, but you can organize your records with care and attention. You may not be able to heal a broken relationship immediately, but you can bring mindfulness to your words and actions in this moment. Begin where you are, with what is before you. The heart grows stronger through consistency than through intensity. The muscles of attention develop not through rare moments of perfect focus, but through the patient practice of returning again and again to the present moment. The spiritual qualities you seek, peace, clarity, compassion, wisdom, are cultivated through thousands of small choices rather than a few dramatic ones. Trust the slow, steady work of daily discipline. It is the quiet stream that, over time, reshapes even the hardest stone. When I began to emerge from the darkness of loss, people asked what purpose I had found in suffering. They expected a neat lesson, a moral to justify the pain. But the relationship between suffering and purpose is not so simple. Purpose does not arrive as compensation for pain, like a reward for endurance. It emerges more mysteriously, like a seed that is weighted in dark earth for the precise conditions that allow it to break open and grow toward light. My suffering did not give me purpose. It cleared the ground so that my true purpose could finally take root. Before meeting Shams, I had lived as a respected scholar and teacher. My days followed a predictable pattern of lectures, writing, and prayer. Students came from distant lands to study with me. I had position, reputation, a clear role in society. But beneath this orderly surface, something essential was missing. I was living a purpose that had been assigned to me, rather than one that arose from the depths of my being. It fit me like a garment tailored for someone else, respectable, but not revealing my true form. The devastation of loss stripped away these external markers of identity and purpose. No longer could I hide behind titles and roles. No longer could I find satisfaction in the approval of others or the comfortable rhythms of a predictable life. I was forced into the wilderness of my own heart, a place I had skillfully avoided through busyness and intellectual pursuits. There, in that barren landscape, with nothing to distract me from essential questions, I began to hear a call that had always been present, but previously drowned out by the noise of my constructed life. This contradicts what we are taught about finding our purpose. The world tells you that purpose is discovered through achievement, through climbing ever higher on the ladders of success and recognition. But I tell you that true purpose is often revealed through descent rather than ascent. It is in the stripping away, not the accumulation. It is found not at the summit of accomplishment, but in the valley of surrender. The seed of your authentic calling requires the darkness of unknowing before it can germinate and reach toward light. I began to write poetry not as a professional duty, but as a necessity of the soul, as natural and inevitable as breathing. Words arranged themselves in new patterns that surprised even me. They came not from my educated mind, but from a deeper source that had been unleashed by suffering. I would wake before dawn, drawn to my writing table by an urgency I could not explain. The poems spoke of love, of longing, of the thin veil between human and divine. They were not composed so much as received, each one a gift I was entrusted to deliver, rather than a product I could claim as my own. This authentic purpose did not eliminate hardship or guarantee constant joy. There were still days of doubt, nights of restlessness, periods when words would not come. But even in these difficult passages, I recognized that I was living in alignment with something true. The sati. Difference was not in external circumstances, but in the relationship between my outer life and inner calling. Even struggle had meaning when it served this deeper purpose. Even failure became valuable when it occurred on a path that resonated with my essential nature. God places within each heart a unique note meant to be sounded in the great symphony of creation. Your purpose is not invented, but discovered. It is not imposed from without, but recognized from within. It has been waiting for you since before your birth, patient as a mountain, faithful as the seasons. It may be hidden by layers of false identity, buried under expectations imposed by family or society, obscured by wounds that demanded your energy for mere survival. But it remains, indestructible as light, awaiting the moment when you are finally present enough to perceive it. The wilderness of adversity often provides exactly the silence needed to hear this call. When the voices of external authority are silenced by crisis, when familiar paths are blocked by circumstances beyond your control, when comfortable identities are stripped away by loss, precisely then, the authentic voice of purpose has the opportunity to make itself known. What appears as devastating disruption may actually be necessary preparation for your soul's true work in the world. Try this contemplative practice for connecting with your deeper purpose. Set aside 20 minutes in a quiet place where you will not be disturbed. Begin by focusing on your breath, allowing your attention to rest in the simple rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. Then, when you feel centered, ask yourself these questions, pausing after each to listen deeply for the response that arises not from your thinking mind, but from a deeper place of knowing. What activities cause me to lose track of time, experiencing flow rather than effort? What work would I choose even if no one ever paid me or praised me for it? What suffering in the world touches my heart most deeply? What gifts do I naturally express when I feel most authentic and alive? If I knew I had only 1 year to live, how would I spend my time? The answers that emerge may surprise you. They may contradict the path you have been following. They may seem impractical or even frightening in their implications. Do not judge or analyze them immediately. Simply record them in a journal and carry them with you for several days, allowing them to work on you beneath the level of conscious thought. Notice what situations, conversations, or moments cause these insights to resonate more strongly. These are signposts pointing toward your authentic purpose. Remember that purpose is rarely a single dramatic discovery, but rather a process of continual unfolding. It reveals itself step by step as you walk the path of presence and authenticity. Each choice to listen to your deeper knowing rather than external pressure creates more clarity. Each act of courage in following what feels truly aligned strengthens your connection to purpose. The path becomes visible as you walk it, not before. In the darkest period after losing Shams, I could not have imagined the purpose that would eventually emerge from that void. Had you told me then that my broken heart would become the source of poetry that would touch countless souls across centuries, I could not have comprehended it. This is the mysterious alchemy of authentic purpose. It transforms even your deepest wounds into gifts for the world. What you have suffered becomes the soil from which your unique contribution grows. The very experiences that once seemed only destructive reveal themselves as essential preparation for your soul's true work. The clearest sign of authentic purpose is that it serves something beyond your personal satisfaction. It connects your individual gifts with needs in the world around you. It creates a channel through which divine energy can flow, nourishing both yourself and others. Unlike false purpose built on ego needs for status or control, true purpose generates energy rather than depleting it. Even when the work is demanding, it leaves you feeling more alive rather than diminished. You recognize it by the quality of aliveness it produces, not by external markers of success. Each morning when you rise, take a moment to remember this truth. What appears as obstacle may be gateway. What seems like ending may be prelude. The very circumstances that appear to block your path may actually be redirecting you toward a truer expression of who you were created to be. The divine hand is at work even in apparent disruption, not imposing suffering as test or punishment, but using all conditions, pleasant and painful alike, to awaken you to your essential nature and unique contribution. The wound becomes a wonder when purpose flows through it. I offer you this truth not as comfort for suffering, but as recognition of its potential transformation. The broken places in your life story are not merely damage to be repaired, but openings through which new life can emerge. When purpose finds its channel through these very openings, what was fragmented becomes whole in a new way, not restored to its former state, but evolved into something that could not have existed without the breaking. This is the divine art of repurposing pain into gift, an alchemy more miraculous than turning lead to gold. After years of walking the path that opened through my greatest loss, I found myself sitting in the garden of our dervish lodge as spring was awakening the earth. The winter had been long and harsh. Many had doubted that certain trees, damaged by frost, would ever bloom again. Yet there before my eyes, tender green buds were emerging from branches that had appeared lifeless only weeks before. I placed my palm against the rough bark of an old apricot tree, feeling the subtle vibration of life rising from roots hidden deep in the soil. And I understood something essential about the nature of renewal. The rebirth you seek does not arrive as a dramatic replacement of everything that came before. It emerges gradually from within what appears to be dead or dormant. The old self is not discarded, but transformed, like a tree that uses the very structure that withstood winter as the framework for new growth. This is the paradox of spiritual rebirth. It requires both continuity and radical change, both the wisdom earned through suffering and the willingness to begin again with the freshness of a child. I meet many souls who are waiting for transformation to arrive as a complete replacement of their current reality. They imagine that spiritual awakening will suddenly transport them from their troubled circumstances into a perfect life, free from struggle. They pray for a rescue from without, rather than a renewal from within. But the divine does not work primarily through replacement. God works through transformation, turning the very material of your present life, including its difficulties, into the substance of your liberation. After the loss of Shams, I did not become someone entirely different from the scholar and teacher I had been before. The knowledge I had acquired, the disciplines I had practiced, the relationships I had formed, all of these continued to be part of my life. But they were reorganized around a new center, illuminated by a different quality of awareness, animated by a deeper current of love. The external forms of my life remained largely recognizable, but the consciousness inhabiting those forms had undergone a profound shift. This understanding contradicts our usual concept of renewal. The world tells you that rebirth requires dramatic external change, a new location, new relationships, new possessions, a complete break with the past. But I tell you that true renewal happens first in the invisible realm of consciousness. It is a shift in how you perceive and relate to the very circumstances you already inhabit. External changes may follow, but they emerge organically from this inner transformation rather than causing it. I have seen this pattern repeated countless times among those who come to our Sufi gatherings seeking a new life. The merchant whose business has failed does not typically find renewal by suddenly becoming a farmer. Rather, he discovers a new relationship to work itself, a way of conducting commerce infused with integrity and service rather than driven by fear and greed. The woman grieving her husband does not escape sorrow by immediately forming a new relationship. Instead, she learns to carry her grief with a dignity that gradually transforms it into a deeper capacity for empathy and presence. The seed of your renewal is already planted within you. It does not need to be acquired from somewhere else. It waits beneath the surface of awareness like a bulb beneath winter soil, containing all the coating necessary for your blossoming. Your task is not to manufacture transformation through willpower or to earn it through perfect behavior. Your task is to create conditions that allow this seed to germinate naturally, to clear away the obstacles, provide nourishment, and trust the intrinsic intelligence that knows exactly how to grow toward light. What are these conditions that support renewal? First, radical honesty about your current state, without shame or embellishment. The plant cannot grow properly if you misrepresent to yourself the soil in which it stands. Second, compassionate acceptance of your humanity, including the wounds and limitations you would rather not face. Renewal emerges from embracing what is, not from rejecting it. Third, small, consistent practices that keep you connected to the present moment, where transformation actually happens, rather than lost in regrets about the past or anxieties about the future. Try this practice for supporting your renewal. Each evening, before sleep, take 5 minutes to reflect on your day. Not to judge it as good or bad, not to measure your progress against some ideal, but simply to notice moments when you felt most alive, most authentic, most connected to something larger than your separate self. These moments may have been brief and subtle: a genuine smile exchanged with a stranger, a minute of complete absorption in meaningful work, a flash of appreciation for the beauty of the world. Write these moments in a journal, describing them in sensory detail. Over time, this practice will help you recognize the qualities of experience that represent your authentic unfolding. You will become more sensitive to the difference between activities that truly nourish your soul and those that merely distract from discomfort. You will develop the capacity to choose more consistently in alignment with your deeper knowing, rather than being driven by habit or external pressure. The path of renewal will become increasingly clear, not as a dramatic leap into the unknown, but as a series of small recognitions and adjustments that gradually change your course. God does not orchestrate your renewal through dramatic interventions that override your participation. The divine works more subtly, through an ongoing collaboration that honors your freedom while supporting your growth. Like a master gardener who knows when to prune, when to water, when to simply wait and trust, God provides exactly what is needed for your particular blossoming. But you must participate actively in the process, bringing your attention and intention to the miracle that is always unfolding in and around you. I remember a period when I had begun to write the poems that would later become the Mathnawi. Words flowed with an ease and depth that felt like gift rather than achievement. Yet there were still days when I would wake feeling disconnected from this current of inspiration. Days when old habits of mind would reassert themselves, when doubts would cloud my vision. On one such morning, feeling particularly contracted and separate, I forced myself to walk to the bathhouse as was my custom, going through the motions of ritual washing without the usual sense of presence. As the attendant poured warm water over my shoulders, I suddenly felt the simple goodness of this ordinary blessing: clean water, human care, the miracle of embodiment itself. Something in me softened and opened. By the time I returned to my quarters, the constriction had dissolved, and words began to form again in my consciousness. I understood then that renewal is not a permanent state achieved once and for all, but a continuing cycle of return. The key is not to avoid the phases of contraction, but to develop the capacity to recognize and move through them with increasing skill and trust. What appears as setback or regression in your journey is often merely part of a larger pattern of growth. Just as a spiral may seem to return to the same point when viewed from above, yet is actually ascending to a new level, so too your path of renewal may revisit familiar challenges while actually engaging them from a more awakened perspective. The test you thought you had already passed appears in a new form, offering the opportunity to embody your learning more deeply, to integrate it more completely into your lived experience. If this message resonated in your soul, subscribe and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation, and leave in the comments, "I am ready for renewal." This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back home, back to yourself. When you share these words, you are not only affirming your own commitment to awakening, but creating a field of intention that supports others walking the same path. We do not transform alone, but in communion with fellow travelers who recognize and reflect our essential nature. The most reliable sign of authentic renewal is an increasing capacity to remain present with what is, rather than constantly seeking escape from discomfort or grasping after pleasure. As you mature spiritually, you develop the ability to hold greater complexity within your awareness, joy and sorrow, success and failure, certainty and doubt, without being dominated by any single experience. This expansive presence is not a dramatic state reserved for mystics, but the natural condition of a heart that has learned to trust the process of life itself with all its seasons and cycles. When I compose poems now, I no longer experience the desperate longing that characterized my early writing after losing Shams. That acute phase of suffering has been transformed into a more spacious awareness that can contain both the memory of loss and the ongoing experience of communion. The wound has not disappeared, but has become a doorway through which love continuously flows. This is the alchemy of spiritual maturity, not an escape from the human condition, but a more complete embracing of it, a recognition that even our brokenness participates in divine wholeness. Remember this truth when you find yourself impatient with the pace of your renewal. The rose does not bloom by forcing its petals open. It grows according to an innate timing that honors both the necessary darkness of the bud and the eventual glory of full flowering. Your awakening follows a similar wisdom. Trust that what appears as delay may actually be perfect unfolding. What seems like obstacle may be precisely the resistance needed to develop strength and resilience. The divine gardener knows exactly what conditions will support your particular blossoming. What withers in winter becomes the compost for spring's awakening. Hold this truth close when old patterns resurface, when familiar challenges reappear, when progress seems to stall or reverse. Nothing is wasted in the economy of spiritual growth. Every experience, pleasant or painful, becomes material for your transformation when met with presence and willingness. The very aspects of yourself that you have rejected or tried to escape are often the places where renewal begins most powerfully, like flowers that break through pavement to reveal the unstoppable force of life itself.